lying in bed getting ready to go to sleep when my husband says to me, "Isn't it really nice that you don't have anything you have to do tomorrow?" And in that moment, I paused because I had to really reflect on that. And I thought to myself, for some people, that would be ideal. That would be great. I'm not one of those people. You see, the fact that my calendar is by design really empty right now because of my disability and because of my limitations, there are two ways to look at it. For a long time, I was really angry. I can't do anything is what I felt. Couldn't walk, couldn't take care of myself, couldn't bathe for over a year. And I'm getting my life back and I'm radically healed. I can walk again. I can take care of myself. I can even go to the grocery store, which I am so grateful for. But there are times where, like, in that moment, I have to reflect on it. Like, the glass could be half full. I'm blessed. I'm lucky that I am able to not do anything and take care of myself and to heal and to be in reflection and to learn. Or I could look at it as not able to do as much as other people. I have a lot of limitations and maybe I can't do those things. And if I look at it through that lens, I get really sad. In this video, I want to talk about the divine irony in God's plan. And when you start to see God's plan and you start to take a step back and you release your expectations, you release this need to control things, you start to see the glass as more half full. The more we try to control, the more pain and suffering we experience. As a very logical-minded person, I love that there's a lot of rationale, there's a lot of systems that support this ideology and this concept that can help us learn and grow. So in case you're new here, hi, my name is Christina Bentel, and I'm the founder of the Collective Healers and Awakened Mom Life. I've been on this journey of healing for over 15 years. Been in the last 3 years that I've been in this radical healing experiment that was kind of forced on me. For years, my health was suffering and declining. Year after year, I would get a new diagnosis. It started with a lot of stomach pain, gastrointestinal disorders, and then it eventually led to things like endometriosis, autoimmune disorders, fibromyalgia. Like, the list is so long. It got to the point where I was finally diagnosed with PTSD. My mental health started to decline more and more. This was after 15 years of therapy, mind you. I gotten to the point where I was actually diagnosed with a neurological disorder. And after a lot of deep study and inner reflection, I started to piece together how all of this was part of a bigger design, because I was not listening to my body. I was not listening to what my energy was telling me, and I was forcing my way through life. I was creating more pain. I was creating more suffering in my body. I didn't realize it at the time, because when you're so stuck in that pain and that suffering, you keep pushing and you keep thinking, like, if I do this, and you're grasping for straws at that point, trying to think, like, if I can control this even more, it'll help the situation. But it doesn't. It makes it worse. And I am the perfect example of that. Is like, when you keep trying to grasp onto things and you're trying and you're forcing it, you're missing a lot of opportunity to actually heal and to improve the situation. So before I turned 40, I was diagnosed with functional neurological disorder, which is still very misunderstood. I've done a lot of research and I can understand the mechanisms in which this happens. Now, not everybody with trauma will get FND, and not everybody with FND will have trauma. But there's a lot of correlations. I think it has a lot to do with the cortisol and high levels of stress hormones that are running through our bodies. It starts to break down your system. I mean, what's going to happen when you've got the gas pedal jammed to the floor for years and years at the time? Something's going to give, right? In my situation, it just happened to be neurological. That really was the breaking point of my body when it said, I can't do this anymore, you've got to slow down. And I didn't want to listen. As a high achiever that had a lot of trauma, that was like constantly working to prove myself in this world, my perceived value was based on my productivity, what I could bring to this world. So can you see the irony of my situation when I was forced to stop? Not just slow down, I was forced to stop. When I became disabled, I lost my ability to walk, I lost my ability to care for myself, I lost my ability to feed myself. Like, these are basic things to survive as a human being, and I was losing my ability to function. And my body said, nope, we're done, can't do it anymore. And at that point, when I was forced to slow down, I was miserable. This would be my second dark night of the soul, my first being when my fiance died when I'm in my early 20s. This dark night of the soul, I didn't think anything could be as painful as losing Jason. This was intense. I was fighting for my life. I decided at that point it was time to cut off contact with my family because I couldn't cope. I was barely functioning, and I wasn't sure how to deal with the toxic dynamics that we had built and we had never learned to heal. I didn't have support in my life. I didn't have friends. I don't really have family. I didn't really have anything, and I'm still working to rebuild all of that. As I was forced to slow down and go inwards, and I started to explore what was making me tick. Why was I trying to force my way through life? I started to really reflect on the questions that were driving this behavior and driving the patterns that were keeping me stuck. A lot of it was a hustle mentality. Like, I have to go, I have to go, I have to control, I have to force things. And you see, for me, I felt like if I was in control, then I could make the situation better. And this is something we learn as children. We learn in this world, in our society, that this need to grasp and control things. The tighter I grasp, the more friction that was created. Think about it this way. Pain is like a rock that sits in your hand. The more firmly you grasp onto that rock, it's not going anywhere. When you can learn to release the need to control this rock, that's when you can alleviate the pain and you start to release the pain. But I couldn't recognize that in the midst of being stuck in it. And it really got me reflecting on the irony of the things that we go through in life. Now think about it. What are you scared of most? What is it that you are most fearful of? What do you worry about the most? Those are the things that are most prominent in your life. Why? Because you're grasping onto them and you're worrying about them, but also because that's part of the lesson. That's what you're here to learn. Think about it this way. There's a grand design. There's a grand plan that God has created for this universe. We are not in control. And every time we try to force something, it's like, here's a wall and we're pushing against it. We're like, well, I want to go this way. And there's like, well, there's a wall. We just go that way. Like, that's the easy way. And you're like, no, I'm going this way. I'm doing this. No, you're not going to. Like, you're going to meet the friction. You're going to keep meeting that resistance because it's not the way you're supposed to be going. And those feelings, those emotions, and all of that turmoil that's coming up in you, it's trying to get you to do something different. But we're not being taught how to do that. We're not being taught to reflect on this. We're not being taught how to feel our emotions. And that's part of what I believe I'm here to teach and to share with this world, is that there's a plan and there's an underlying formula for all of this. And we've overcomplicated it. And yes, it is complex, but it's also simple when you start to see it. And you're like, oh, I get it. Okay. So then I could just release all of this and just go with the flow. Oh, wow. Okay. It really does shift your perspective of how you show up in this world, how you manifest a life that you're meant to live and to find your purpose. Let's talk about what I call God's playful experiment. Every decision, every struggle, everything that we go through is part of God's plan of knowing itself more deeply. It's part of it embracing curiosity and its desire to know itself and to learn and grow. You see, we are all one. We are all the same energy. We are fractals of the collective consciousness. So think about it this way. At some point in what we perceive as time, collective consciousness broke out into fractals of souls. And over time, this energy manifested into physical form to the planets, the earth, the sun, human beings, rocks, a bug, water, air. All of these are different forms of consciousness experiencing itself. It's learning, exploring, and expanding its consciousness. So I had this thought the other day and I thought it was really cool. I envision God as like this playful entity, non-gender, just very fluid. And I give it kind of human form to help me with my imagination and kind of like bringing it to life. And I imagine this entity as kind of being very playful and very curious. And God's like, I want to be this marble and experience this marble. How cool is that? Or I'm going to be a blade of grass. Like, how cool is it to be this blade of grass? Because it's consciousness, it's everything, it's everywhere. When we can start to see how we are related to all of these things and we are one, but we have this perceived notion of separateness, it really opens your eyes to the grand scheme of things. And then to take it a step further, think about it this way. We are avatars in a video game. We're like the non-player characters, you know, like the NPC characters, where it's like the NPC character, they're there by design. They're part of the design, right? They're not really controlling anything. Like, that's what we are. But we think we're in control. We have this perceived separateness when we're really not in control. We are here to learn through these experiences, but there's divinity and consciousness at the core of who we are that's truly in control. And I had this thought the other day where I'm like, I wonder if there's a point where there's like a consciousness or an entity who gets like the game over sign and they decide like, I'm out of here and I'm done. This didn't work. And then they get back to the collective consciousness, heaven, whatever you want to call it. And they look back and they're like, man, that is not what I didn't learn what I thought I was going to learn. Okay, I'm going to try this again. And then you're reincarnated. And the beautiful thing is you've got infinite lives. So you're like, I'm going to come back this time and I'm going to try, I'm going to be a man this time. And maybe instead of having millions and millions of dollars, I'm going to live in poverty because that will teach me the lessons of maybe some gratitude, resilience. We'll throw in some other lessons about maybe learning to take care of my body better. And you get to decide what you want to get to learn when you come back for this lifetime. I think about it as a video game. It gives me a lot more ability to release and let go and a fun way to explore of like, okay, what is this teaching me? Now let's talk about embracing greater design. Imagine a fractal in sacred geometry. So on a macro scale, we can look back and we can see like, wow, this is complex, it's beautiful, it's amazing, like far greater than anything the human mind can really comprehend because it's so far beyond what we're capable of understanding and experiencing in this density. So now as we zoom in on the tiny details, we start to see it expand. Now imagine that you are one of these tiny, tiny details, but you're so close to it that you can't even comprehend. You don't even realize it because you are such a small piece of this magnificent, beautiful woven piece. If you notice that I keep moving, it's because the sun is rising and I'm trying to keep myself out of the sun. FYI, as human beings, we can get so caught up in our day-to-day lives that we miss the opportunity to take a step back to see the bigger picture. We don't see ourselves as part of a video game because we're so stuck in the pain of it that we can't even begin to step away to comprehend that there might be something else. I did for a long time too, and I think it's part of the growth experience. When I lost Jason, my world spiraled. That was just the first time. And I was in so much pain that I'm like, there can't be a God. Why would a God, like, what kind of a God would do this to a person? Like, I had lost my best friend 2 years before that. My health was suffering. I was 20 years old and I was miserable. There was no way for me in that point in time, in such deep suffering, for me to take a step back and be like, oh, I get it. But that's part of the plan. That's part of how we learn and part of how we grow. And I think that that's something that we can have more grace with ourselves and for those around us when we start to see like, okay, there's layers to this. And you can't go from here to here. You've got to go here. You've got to take the baby steps to be able to get to this level of understanding. But here's the cool thing. When you start to see yourself as part of like a beautiful fractal design and you see like, oh, okay, so I'm part of something that is far greater than I can comprehend. And you stop fighting because you recognize like, wait, consciousness is so far more expansive than my limited understanding can even comprehend. So if I surrender to that, what magic could happen? And you start to understand that every single thing that happens in this life and every single thing that happens in our existence is part of something far greater than we can ever understand. But when you begin to release the rock, drop the pain, and say, okay, what's the lesson? What is the lesson that I'm fighting against? How can I embrace this? For me, that was the notion that grinding away and hustling in corporate life was the way to happiness, was the way to success, was the way to finding myself. And I was ignoring the fact that pain was telling me otherwise. I'm like, I'll just work harder. I'll just keep pushing more. Eventually it'll come, right? And they say the definition of crazy is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Yet so many of us are doing it. We keep doing the same thing, expecting, well, someday things will turn around. We stay in that toxic relationship where like my partner will finally figure out that, you know, I'm not happy because of XYZ, and they'll finally make the change. Or this career, my boss will leave at some point. I'll get the raise that I want. All of these are sign markers to tell you that you're going in the wrong direction. And we keep going around them instead of finding a new direction. We're like, oh, well, no, I'll just go around and I'll figure this out. Instead of saying, oh, God knows better than I do, and I'm getting signs that this is not right for me. Okay, so I'll listen. I will surrender and listen for guidance. When you get to that point and you start to surrender to that point, it's a really cool thing. Yet so many of us fight and we continue to struggle because we can't see that bigger picture. Okay, so imagine, if you will, we go back to the fractal. You are a line in this design. Now, does the line control where it wants to go? Well, no, because you're part of a design. If this line decides that it's going to go over here, well, then it's not a design. It goes against the very laws of nature. If a tree had consciousness and decided one day that it's going to fight against its design, and it's like, instead of leaves, I'm going to grow rocks. I'm going to do that. The more it decided it wanted to grow rocks, the more pain it will experience. You know why? Because that's not part of its design. It's not what it's meant to do. It's not here to do that. But the more it fights and it's like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it because that's what's going to make me happy. I'm going to grow rocks. That's going to make me happy. One is that the tree has such a limited perspective that it's making a decision based on what? Very limited understanding and knowledge. It sees rocks on the ground and it's like, oh, those rocks are cool. I want those rocks. I can make rocks. But it doesn't understand that that's not what it's here to do. That's not what it's meant to do. And the longer that the tree compares itself to something that it is not, the more pain that it will experience. And in such a simplistic way, when the tree decides, yeah, I'm a tree. I grow leaves. That's really cool. I'm going to grow some leaves. I love it. And then the tree's happy. And yes, this is like an oversimplification, but at the same time, it's not. And that is the beauty once you start to see it. When you start to recognize that it's not an oversimplification. And that's truly what this entire existence is all about. So why is pain a necessary part of growth? Why do we feel like there can be so much suffering in this life? Why is there so much chaos? There's war, there's conflict. Why are all these things happening? If God is love and there's this design to all of this, like some of us, like myself, I remember growing up the granddaughter of a devout Baptist preacher, preaching hell and damnation, and I could not wrap my head around it, could not understand, like, well, why would God want to punish us? And why, if there's a God, why is there so much pain and suffering in the world? And I could not reconcile this for a long time. Two things, and I won't go into this too deeply right now, maybe for another time. One, the God of organized religion, I believe, has been tainted and flawed by human perception. Yes, there is a lot of truth to it. There's also a lot that we need to weed through to better understand and embrace what God truly is. Number two, there's a reason for pain and suffering. There's a reason for conflict. There's a reason for all of this because it's part of the design. So one thing is, as conscious beings, we are born with an innate desire to survive. That's part of what helped us to evolve. That's part of what keeps us here. Yet as we have become smarter and our brains have gotten larger, we have taken it to a different degree where now we are so hyper-focused on what we perceive as survival that it's actually creating more pain and suffering. Survival really is having food in your belly, water to drink, shelter over your head. But we have taken it to the next step further. Survival means I must be successful and I have all this money in the bank and I must be respected. All of these things that we have taken to another layer that's actually creating more pain and suffering for us. All that pain and suffering is here for a reason. Pain is a catalyst for growth. Think about it this way. A child is going to school and he's going to take a test, but he's been given all the answers. Is he motivated to study? Is he motivated to try? No. Without challenge, without pain, there's no motivation to learn and grow and evolve. And if we go back to the fact that we are all God, experiencing ourselves and learning, expanding, and growing, like this is God saying, like, I really want to expand in consciousness. How can I do that? Well, pain catalyst does exactly that. So pain serves a purpose. When you start to recognize and embrace that, that's when you can start to release it. And you can stop hanging on to it. Yes, pain has a purpose, but when we hang on to it and we grasp onto it, that's when it becomes suffering. And suffering, I know that some say suffering is a choice, and I think that to some degree, suffering is part of the human experience, but it's also something that we can learn to release. Like the Buddha said, attachment is a source of suffering. When we can learn not attachment and we can start to release our grasp and our need to control, and we can release our attachment to things that are creating suffering, that's when we start to experience more joy and happiness. As you navigate this human experience, remember that pain is a part of life for a reason. It's there by design. Can you learn the lessons from it, embrace them, and let them go? Learning to release your suffering and learn from your pain, it takes time, it takes practice. Remember, things are layered. You're not just going to jump from here to here. You've got to be able to internalize and embody the lessons that go in between. And one of the greatest ways that we can do this is through self-reflection, through meditation, through slowing down. And as I mentioned at the start of this video, the irony and the pain that I experienced through so much of my life was through the fact that I refused to slow down. I would not listen to my body. It was trauma that was keeping me stuck in these cycles. And by design, as I kept pushing against that wall, eventually something gave and it said, no, you can't keep pushing, honey, you gotta stop. And that's when I finally was forced to stop, and I could have given up. I could have given up completely and said, clearly pushing didn't work, and that was the only answer. Well, no, there are other things that I could try. What other things can you try? What other things can you embrace in this journey, in this experiment? I would love to hear your comments below. Like, what in your life might you be able to reframe and look at it in a different way? And this is not about spiritual bypassing, where you're like, oh, okay, well, this is fine. It doesn't hurt anymore. The pain is pain. It can hurt. Embracing it and acknowledging and accepting it is part of the healing experience. So I don't want you to reject it. I want you to embrace it. Like, yeah, that hurt. What did I learn from that? How am I growing? And how am I becoming a more expansive human being through these experiences? So make sure you drop in the comments below and share with me your experience. And maybe some of the irony that's happened in your life and the lessons that you have learned from it. If you like this video, I'd be really honored if you like and subscribe, and maybe even share it with somebody that might find it helpful. So the next time that life presents you with a challenge that seems to contradict everything that you want in life, I hope you'll consider that maybe it has a deeper purpose. Maybe, just maybe, that irony is part of a grander design to help you get closer to what you're truly meant to embody in this lifetime.